Hello everybody, welcome to ICC. I'm Grandmaster Pia Cramling from Sweden. I'm going to do a recap of the first leg of the Grand Prix, which is being played just now in Berlin. And now we have reached the first stage. The group play is finished. We have 4 winners who have qualified to the semi-final, which will start already tomorrow. And in the Grand Prix we have 3 tournaments. All the players, there are 24 players, are playing in 2 of these 3 tournaments, and they are fighting for the 2 very last spots to the candidate tournament. So in each tournament we have 16 players. They are divided in 4 groups. They play against the other 3 players twice, with black and white, and after 6 games we have a winner, or if there are 2 or more players tied with the same points, they are playing a tiebreak. So let's see, who are the 4 winners? So Hikaru Nakamura, he has made his comeback to classical chess after 2 years. He got a wild card to the Grand Prix, and he was leading his group from the very start to the last round. But in the very last round he was facing a young Esipenko, and things went wrong for Nakamura. So there were a very nerve-wracking game where Esipenko had very good chances to catch the full point, to get the spot in the semi-final, but in the end they went for a queen ending, and with some very good moves Nakamura managed to save the draw. In the group B, Vladimir Fedoseev together with the Radoslav Wojciech from Poland, they were dominating this group until the very last round. But in the last round Wojciech, he made a draw with Oparin, and Fedoseev, he was facing Rapport. He had lost to Rapport in the first stage of the group, and now with white he needed a draw, and playing for a draw is not always so easy. So what happened, which is very typical, is that he started to play very passively, and finally it was Richard Rapport who won the game, and he won also the right to play a tiebreak with Wojciech. And this was a very exciting tiebreak. It was actually decided already in the very first game. Rapport with black, they got into rook endgame, and he managed to catch white's king. So Rapport won the game with black, and in the second game, in the second semi-rapid game, he was never in real danger of not keeping the balance, and he made a draw. So in the C group we saw Aronian, and he was actually the first one to qualify. Already after 5 games he had secured his spot in the semi-final. And in the D group there was Vachier-Lagrave, who started so well. He was leading the whole time, but Dominguez, winning his last 2 games, catch up with him, and they had a tiebreak today. The first game in the tiebreaks with the semi-rapid was a quiet ending. Vachier-Lagrave was white, it was a draw, but in the other game where Dominguez was white, in the end he could decide the game with a king attack, and he took the last spot for the semi-final. And I must say that the games have been so exciting, so many positions, so many games I really would like to show for you. And we have seen these players, these very strong players from the very best, because when they play group play there is no time for short draws. You need to win games, and there have also been lots of nerves. So let's go and see what I have chosen, and I hope you will like it. So the first game is with Dominguez with white, we have Vachier-Lagrave with black, and actually we are going to see 2 games, because the same opening was chosen both in the group play in round number 3, but also in the last tiebreak game played today. Gyuko piano, which has become so popular, very slow play, long maneuvering, and it has very popular among the very best players. we can see that white decided to keep his bishop, his white square bishop, even if his pawn is on white side. But it's like, I think white likes to keep more pieces on the board, a little bit to make it more difficult for black, who has a little bit more cramped position. And when the white bishop has gone away from this b5, f1 diagonal, there's black black is playing a little bit against white king, because g2 and h3 is not as well defended as it would be if the bishop was on f1. And actually, a position like this, very similar like this, Wesley Su had with white against Magnus Carlsen in a semi-rapid game a year ago. And Wesley Su with white, he got some problems. So I think this is why he decided that he wanted to try this setup from the black side. And here, in the first game, in the classical, black decided to open up the position, and we are going to see this game first, and after we are going back to see the game played in the tiebreak. So Wesley Su, he decided to change the character of the of the game, and he had to give one of the bishop, and here he needs to take some space in the center. Now black is actually threatened to win a pawn with knight take h3, so white has to defend it, either moving the king up or, as he did, defending the queen. And now white just likes to keep the tension. He has the bishop pairs, he would maybe like to open up the piece position in some moment, and he's just bringing his pieces to more active places. And here, with the two rooks standing on c1 and e1, I think this is the reason why black decides to make a quite big move, which will change the character completely. So black wants to open up the king side, and for me it's very logical now that with white you just get a pass pawn, you are closing this diagonal for the bishop, and you have the bishop pair for white. And in the long run, you will want to move the knight from g3, and you want maybe to play e3, so the knight on f4 has to be pushed back. But Dominguez decided to open up the position. I think this is a little bit dangerous, and probably maybe he has miscalculated. It's possible here to play, not what he did, but to play this way. But it looks very, very scary. So many pieces in front of the white king, and the rook on a8 will also come in here. So, but it looks like that this position is about equal with chances for both players. But now, just because the rooks are standing where they are, if the rook on c1 was on a1, it would be completely fine. But now black has a very nice idea. Very obvious, but if you take my rook, I will take your rook and I stay. I keep the bishop pair. But this move, and I think this is what white missed. The rook comes to the 7th rank, and now white is in big problems. So we have this very strong rook on the 7th, on the 2nd rank, but black is also threatening to take 2 pawns. There's no way white can defend both pawns. So white is just hoping to see if he can create some kind of counterplay. So we have 2 rooks for both sides on the 7th. But how come that this is good for one of the players, but it's bad for the other one? Of course, white king can escape, and an active king against the passive king is what decides the game. Threatened mate in 2. And now, if white would have played like this, he played differently, the black king will just escape, and it will be helping the rooks to mate the white king. Instead he played rook e5, but this is just completely hopeless for white, and the last moves were these. Let me mate again. So yeah, so white resign. So let's go back to the game. So in this position in the tie breaks, black decided to play differently, and he continued in this way. And this move I like very much for white. The knight on f5, we know this is a fantastic square to put the knight on, and here it is looking at black king, is looking at the pawn d6, but by closing this diagonal for the white bishop, the king side is also becoming more safer for white. So this is just a very good move, and it makes life a little more, it makes life difficult for black. So there's not rook a8, is not what black would like to do, because the bishop on e3 is a little bit, the bishop on a7 is not guarded, and that's why black just play a little waiting move. White decided to open up the position, and actually if black takes this way, he will get some problem, because there's so bad coordination between his pieces. And now rook d8, knight d6, yeah, it's just almost winning at once for white. So that's why he took with the f pawn, and white is just putting more pressure. There was not possible to win the pawn, as black has this tactical, and actually he wins the piece. And this is a good move. He has to play this to keep his, to guard the pawn on d6. He has to keep the d pawn going. And this position is actually quite fine for black. Black's pieces are still are on the king side, but there's one rook on the a7 which needs to get into play, and that's why I would like to play maybe b6 or maybe b5, yeah, so the rook will be more active, and there's no problem with the knight, not yet, because you can always take on e4, and like this you can just get back. So, but here black starts to make mistakes, but it's not so strange. They're playing with very little time, and I think black had just some few minutes when we reach this stage of the game. And now this move, which is a big mistake, because the king side gets so weak, and we always know that pushing pawns in front of our own king, we always have to be very careful with that. But I think because when you're have little time, you want to make big things, and he just wanted the queen to go away from where it stands. But this weakness will be very, very serious for black. Black cannot move, cannot change queens. The e5 pawn will be hanging. Very good move. King is more safer, and there's some plan moving the queen, playing g3 and pushing back the knight from f4. And black has a very, very difficult position, because now g3 is a very big threat, h5 is hanging, so Vachier-Lagrave is trying to force the play, but it will not help. Open up the long diagonal, threatening to take on e5, and black is trying to save himself with some tactics, and we can see what happened then. Of course, threatened mate on h7, and if the pawn would have been on h7, black would have been fine, but this weakness is too big. of course keeping the queen there, and just if white can move his rook, there will be mate quickly. And here, this little move, queen h1, keeps everything safe. There was still possibility to make a mistake. Here, actually, the game would have changed and black is winning. But king h1, everything is safe, no checks, and there's no way for black to defend his king. And black resigned. So let's go to the next game, to the next group. And in here I have chosen to see the game between Hikaru Nakamura with white against Alexander Grischuk with black. So we have Semi Averbach opening in the King's Indian. I'm very happy to see the King's Indian among the top players. It's not often they choose it because it's not a solid opening, but here Alexander Grischuk, he was in a must-win situation if he wanted to have a chance to qualify for the semi-finals. And this game was played the day after Yuri Averbach himself. He was celebrating his 100th birthday on 8th of February. And playing with the h-pawn is quite common in different lines for white against the King's Indian. And this idea is actually a way of playing against black's plan. Because if white would do something, I don't know, maybe knight f3, something slowly, okay, you can go knight g4, but you can also have an idea to play, you move the knight and you go f5, because this is very logical to play for f5. But with h4 played, this plan is not so exciting any longer for black to try to go for f5, because white will open the h file, maybe play queen e2, queen h6, bishop h6, and it's actually white who will get some play against the black king. So instead of that, black is now playing on the queen side. And here white has to make a choice. The pawn on e4 is hanging, but if he defends it right away, I think just black can take the pawn, and it's not clear that white has enough compensation for it. Instead, Nakamura played this very, very nice move, this positional approach, keeping the h-land closed, but putting a pawn as far as he can in the black's camp. And now the bishop and g7 will be restricted, but also the king will be restricted. And it's not pleasant for black to have a pawn like that so close to his king. The king side is closed. White wants to play now on the queen side, and he wants to take away this very strong knight on c5. The right move. There was no way white could try to get into some tactics. This would just lose on the spot because the knight is pinned, and here the right move to take, and now black has this blow just winning immediately. And the point is that after knight to d5 there is no mate because black took the f-rook, so the king can escape to f8. And if white takes back with the pawn, the black bishop is entering the gate, and now it's just all over. In case of this, and yeah, black wins. And here it looked like that what has been happening on the queen side has been helping black. There's a backward pawn on c3 for white. Black has also got this square on c5 for his knight. But White, of course, know what black plan is, and white is going to play against that. Of course, the knight is brought in to go and also control the c5 square. And of course white wants to change his knight for the black knight, not his bishop. His bishop is the strong piece, the one he wants to keep, the one he needs to keep. And if black now could made his bishop on e7, put it in on b6, he would be completely fine. Of course, he would have been playing on c5, there's a weakness on c3, but it's not possible. Oh, sorry, it's not possible to play like that. And so black cannot any longer keep a piece on c5. Time to open up the position when the strong knight has been exchanged. And here I think black makes a mistake and a little bit forgetting about what white wants to play. So I would just have played this move. It looks very logical. You put the bishop on the right diagonal and you are defending the king, and it's not easy at all for white to try to exchange this bishop. But instead black played this move, and now Nakamura with some good moves, he will just put enormous pressure on black, and black's position will almost be paralyzed after what we will see here. So he's keeping the pressure towards the black king, and now black is doomed just to wait. He cannot do anything actively, and it's not a pleasant position for him to have here. And white can just play small moves to put his pieces on the very best squares. Now with the queen on e3, white is actually defending his pawn on h6, so he's planning to take on f6, and I will show you why. So let's see that black is just waiting, and after that you can change the rook first, and then up with the king. You have to put the king on the most safest square, and it's here. And the idea we will see next move. And now yes, white takes, and the problem for black is that black cannot take back the pawn, which means that white will remain with these pawns, with this f6 pawn, because after this it's just game over. So this is why Alexander Grischuk, with very little time, he realized he wants to do something concrete, and he played these forcing moves. For the mate, very good move, because black has no time to change queens, and the h pawn will just march down to the last rank. And here Nakamura had his last move before the control, his 40th move, and he has to play the right one. It's not time for white to take the rook. Black has this counter, so something white absolutely cannot allow. So instead he played this very good move. In here black has two choices. Grischuk, with very little time, he made the wrong one, but even after the task for black would be very difficult to try to save this position. With the pawn up, all the pawns on white squares, and the rook, yeah, has to be sacrificed for the h pawn. black wants to take on h6, but white, of course, will not allow it. And here, black decided to resign. There's nothing he can do to stop the h-pawn. As after, for example, this, white just takes the queen, and everything is well defended. I think it was a very nice game of Nakamura. And here we have a position from the tie breaks between Vachier-Lagrave with white. We have Rapport with black, and it's black to move here. And I will just show what happened. So black changed the queens, and he played this little pawn move, which is annoying for white, because somehow you have to make a decision. What do you want to do with your pawns? And white decided that he wanted to change as many pawns as possible, so he took the pawn. But we can now see that the pawn structure is so much worse, something black will try to use later on in the game. White chose to force matter. It was maybe not important, but it's nothing wrong with what he played. White has 2 pass pawn, but the c pawn is so much quicker. So that's the main pawn, and white has to be careful, so he's in time to stop it. So rook d1 can be met by rook e1 and taken back with the king on e1. Here white actually probably could force the draw like this, saving the pawn, and king d7, up with the king first, and now if black takes on a4, I will take on c2, and if you don't take it, I will just march with my h-pawn, with my a-pawn, and when it reaches the last rank, you have to take it. So this looks very much, this would have been a draw. But instead, he went up with the king, which is very normal, but it's a little bit dangerous when we have double rooks on the board. And here I think white makes mistake. He should just defend the pawn. He is worse, but I think this is absolutely possible to defend this position, and it was better to do it this way than what happened in the game. Because now the h3 pawn is not defended by the rook any longer, and we can see that the black king has a route to enter in white's position. And an active king against a passive king is very, very dangerous in rook endgames. And here was probably the moment trying to be a little more active with his king, but the position is difficult for white. Absolutely, it's difficult for white now. But what happened is even worse. Sorry, he played rook e2. And all of a sudden there's a mate on g2. Oh no, why to stop it? And here actually black probably, he played king f1, fine, which I think is the most logical move, and also what I surely would have played. But it's actually stronger to go the other way. And the idea is that the king can help to enter. And I will just show you one line what could happen. King f3, avoiding the mate. The king is helping. If you try to rush with your pawn, black will actually play for mate. For the mate on e3, for the mate on e2, and for example after this, black wins. Instead he played king f5, and now white had a chance, but Vachier-Lagrave had so little time. I think there were like seconds on his clock, maybe 15, 16 seconds, and it's not easy to choose the right one. So he made a move that loses on the spot, but this was the chance to keep and stay in the game, and maybe after something like this, and if black tries to create some, to take the h-pawn, he has an a-pawn to play with. So that was the best way for him to stay in the game with king f3, and after something like this we can just play this endgame, which should be a draw. But white play rook b2, and now there's nothing which can save the white king. Very nice last move, and white resign as it is going to be made. So the very last game I would like to show you from the first stage is the game between Aronian against the young German player Vincent Keimer, and Aronian was dominating the group. He was also very much dominating this game, so I just like to see his very nice game, the very nice play, and also his very interesting idea in the opening. The very popular card spot structure against Caro-Kann, avoiding bishop g4 at any moment, and a very unusual idea. More normal is to go c3, avoid a knight b4, but then black has this possibility to open up in the center. And now what to do with the bishop? If white moves the bishop, the black bishop will come out and black gets out his passive bishop. But this is not what Aronian was planning. So now, how to take back? Maybe it looks surprising to take back with a pawn. So white is going to have a double pawn, isolated double pawn. But with the pawn on d3, we see that the white squares in the center are so well controlled. The c-line will be open for the rook, so white will compensate his double pawn in the center with active piece play. Black can take on b2, but it would be very dangerous. He would get very passive, so instead he prefers to play solid. Trying a little bit to fight for the black squares on the king side, on the queen side. And this is actually a mistake. I think black had to keep the bishop because it was not the right moment to change it. He needs to have a rook fc8 first, trying to push the knight back. And because now white gets exactly what he wants. And after that, it's so difficult for black to get back in the game. Good move. And we see again a rook on the 7th, which is very, very strong, very annoying for black. And here white is dominating the game. Black has to defend b6, but then the knight cannot move, and so he's trying to bring his king, but the situation is just very difficult for black now. So giving black the choice what piece to change. If you change the knight, the b6 pawn will be gone, and if you do it like the game, yeah, we will see what happens. And here I think it's the last moment black can try something active, and I think it would have been better to play this way. Even if white is having a big advantage, but I think this would have been the best he could do. Instead, black decided to be passive, just to wait, and to be passive in the long run is normally not a good choice. The pawn move, and now the knight is doomed. It can never move to any other square. It just has to stay where it is. To have some mate ideas, if the black rook leaves c8. And now white has the active rook, the active bishop, the fantastic pawn d4, e5, restricting black's pawns, restricting black's knight, and white just need to get either a king into black's king side or a pawn, a pass pawn on the king side. Black is a closing position, but he would have needed to have at least one more pawn, a pawn on f7 to save this. So after this very nice last move, black resigned. So this is what I wanted to show you from the first stage, from the group stage. And I hope you have enjoyed being with me here to see these games. I'm going to be back after the semifinals, and hope to see you then again. Thank you. Bye.